Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's Tzaraim Tovim. I hope everybody's doing well. It's a pleasure to welcome making the debut. So we'll make a Shechayana without shame or malchut. We'll make to welcome Rabbi Barry Kleinberg, who is really joining us for the first time. We had the pleasure of meeting. He spoke in our shul as a scholar in residence a few months back in Toronto, and that's where we met. And we had a very nice time together in discussion. And we said time to get him on the Torah in Motion Zoom classes. So that's why we're here today. Rabbi Kleinberg, as you can hear, lives in London. Well, he was born, but he's currently also lives in London, England, and he teaches there. He was one of the original SAC scholars, of course, from London. That's even more important. And he's also working on a PhD in philosophy at University of Haifa, and he's a trained lawyer. And it's a pleasure to welcome here to kick off we'll start with a six-part series on non-traditional, non-Orthodox thinkers, their thoughts on tradition. And Vakasha, Rabbi Kleinberg, we're looking forward to hear your thoughts and the thoughts of, as you portray the thoughts, funnel the thoughts of others to us. Vakasha. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Kelman. It's real siyata d'shmaya that I'm here, really in the hands of heaven, because I was speaking to Professor Rabbi Mark Shapiro back in November last year. And I told him I was going to Toronto as a scholar in residence. He said, "Oh, you have to meet this guy called Rabbi J. Kelman. Do you know him?" I said, "No." And I didn't have a formal interview to teach for Torah in Motion, but Rabbi Kelman heard me about 74 times over Shabbat, it felt like. And I feel like that was my interview. So it's really great to be here. I may be teaching the first time tonight or this afternoon for you. But I go back with Torah in Motion many, many years. I knew about the website where I think a decade ago. I don't know when. I used to subscribe for a monthly fee back in the day when you could pay a monthly subscription and download unlimited, and then they changed it to only a few. So I've listened to many hundreds of excellent shiurim. So I'm going to talk about um, this topic of unorthodox thinkers. I'm going to define all my terms. I'm going to share my screen because, oh, it works. Jay, you can see that, right? Excellent. So Jay gave a biography. I've got a slide in a minute with some more details about me, but it's not about me. It's about our thinkers. But I am very much a philosopher. And my way of thinking and the way I approach text is through a modern analytic philosophical approach. And therefore, this next slide really spoke to me. Right. You should be aware of the trolley problem. The trolley problem traditionally is you've got five people on one track and one person on the other track. And your decision is, do you change the trolley to go to just kill one person instead of five? But this joke here, nobody is in any danger. There's no one on the tracks. You're a professor for moral philosophy. Do you tie people to the rails to save your job? So we're told to always start with a joke. This is my philosophy joke. By the way, philosophy jokes don't get any better than this. So I apologize right now. So as Rabbi Kelman said, I'm an osteopath, a non-practicing lawyer, a change of career in my 30s, a mini midlife crisis. I teach at the London School of Jewish Studies. And the SAC scholar, even though I was in the inaugural cohort, there are now three cohorts and a fourth cohort coming. A real pleasure and privilege to meet with scholars all over the world. And don't ask me about my PhD, because you know what happens when you ask a PhD student what they're researching. They go off for about 2 hours and you're none the wiser. But I'm very interested in the truth of other religions from a Jewish perspective. But I won't say any more. Maybe one day Jay will be brave enough to have a course really in Jewish philosophy that I really enjoy. So I really enjoyed putting this slide together. I don't know why, it really made me laugh because I want to go back to the title. The title is Unorthodox Jewish Thinkers on Tradition, right? And I started thinking I have to really define my terms. And this is a classic question. This is really a classic question. What are Jewish thinkers? You know, Is it somebody who is Jewish who thinks, and when we say thinkers, I mean philosophers, although the people that I am going to be looking at in this course are not all just philosophers. But is a Jewish thinker a Jew who thinks? Is it a person who is not necessarily Jewish who thinks about Judaism? Can it only be Jews who think about Judaism who are Jewish thinkers? Right. And this I don't think it's a silly question. I think it's an important question. There are many papers that have been written about this. Now, I have chosen, because I think it's the right answer, Jews who think about Judaism. But I picked a subset of Jews, and they're Jews who did not in any way associate with Orthodox Judaism. We'll see, maybe one of them is a bit more interesting. Thank you, Asha. Yes, Asha's put in the chat. I love having two screens. I can see the chat. A PhD is a process by which you learn more and more about less and less until you know everything about nothing. That's right. That's right. And there's another definition which is the opposite of that, which is scientists. But anyway, so I think it's really interesting for us to think about Jews who did not associate themselves with Orthodox Judaism, but had what to say about Judaism. Now, Judaism in this definition is a very broad word, because even though I'm talking about Orthodox Judaism, when I use the word tradition, I mean, mainstream orthodoxy. These labels are terrible, but do we follow the Shulchan Aruch? Yes, that's our orthodoxy, for better or for worse. It's pretty broad, but it's also pretty narrow. So none of these thinkers kept Shabbat or Kashrut, right? That wasn't their thing. But they were very interested in Judaism. And when I say I'm taking a broad definition of Judaism, I mean that non-Orthodox thinkers interacted with either God, Torah, Judaism on the one hand, or with Israel Zionism on the other hand, because many of these thinkers were really interested in the state of Israel because of when they lived. That's very important. Or the idea of the state of Israel. I was actually thinking this morning that would I change? Because these slides I wrote many years ago and I'm editing them as I go along. Do they change in light of the war that's been going on for the last 18 months? I don't think they do. I don't think they actually. I think the thinkers and their ideas are timeless questions. So, I mean, we may be thinking about October 7th in the last 18 months. By the way, Rabbi Kelman, you made the Shechianu. I'd also make a Shechianu. My son came out of Miluim today. He's been serving 184 days out of the last 365. It's quite incredible. So we're very grateful. My son is at home in Yerushalayim, and I can start sleeping again. That's the most important thing. So that's where we are, right? These are all Jews. They're not Orthodox, but we are looking at how they think about Jewish topics. By the way, there are all sorts of rules and not rules in my classes. You can ask questions whenever, put it in the chat. I'll monitor the chat. Disagree with me, shout at me. It's all good. It's all good. Okay. I'm British. I've got a stiff upper lip. Nothing bothers me. Okay. So there's some really interesting articles that look at this question of Jewish thinkers. So Jewish thought is not a single continuous tradition, but rather a varied mix of works which reflect the specific ideological and historical positions of those who wrote them. And that's really important, right? When we look at Isaiah Berlin as a Jewish thinker, we have to think about who Isaiah Berlin was. When did he live? What was his political religious mindset? Right? Jewish thought is not just, Mishnah, Gemara, Rishonim, Achronim. Jewish thought is this shmorg I think you all know what that means. I don't really know what it means, but I think I know what it means. Right? It's this just mix of ideas. A clear definition of Jewish thought has been tested in modern times by thinkers who are Jewish, but whose work isn't concerned with explicating Judaism, as well as thinkers who split their time between general thought and Jewish thought. So here's the question. Were Karl Marx, the father of communism, and Ludwig Wittgenstein, the philosopher of language, both who were Jewish, were they Jewish thinkers? Right. And if you look at Karl Marx's work, you might not find very much in the way of his thought about Judaism, if he had any particular thought. Wittgenstein, even less. So they were Jewish, they were thinkers, but they're not Jewish thinkers. Hermann Cohen's very interesting. He was, is it Jewish? Is it not Jewish? When he's writing about Kant, is it Jewish? Now, if you take the Rambam, Maimonides as an example, by the way, he's a Jewish thinker, for the sake, no doubt there. He's an Orthodox Jewish thinker. When the Rambam is writing a commentary, say, or mentioning Socrates, Aristotle, or the Arabic philosophers, is he doing Judaism? I think he is. He's doing it within the context of Jewish thought. I'm very privileged at the moment. I'm teaching the Guide for the Perplexed to a few university level students. It's really interesting. A couple of guys who got no yeshiva background and they wanted to learn the guide. So luckily, Professor Len Goodman has just done a fabulous new translation, which I'm enjoying. And they are blown away that Maimonides spends so much time quoting outside thinkers, right? But that's Jewish. That's clearly Jewish. The last slide and this slide, by the way, are both from My Jewish Learning. It's a nice article on Jewish thought. The contemporary French philosopher Jacques Derrida represents an interesting recent example of these uncertainties. Derrida, whose philosophy of deconstruction is one of the most influential intellectual movements of our time, has rarely written on explicitly Jewish themes and sources, right? So this is great. Jewish thinker, but not really doing Judaism. But his Jewishness has generated this great debate, right? So that's really interesting because it means that people are looking at Jacques Derrida and saying, well, even though he didn't write about Judaism, he's still a Jewish thinker, right? They're taking this extreme view that a Jew who is not writing about Judaism is still a Jewish thinker. Now, what I'm doing in this class, which is different, is I'm bringing 5 thinkers who were all Jewish, who did interact with Judaism. Right? Otherwise, there would be no end. I could pick any Jews who ever wrote anything and say, right, they're Jewish thinkers and talk about any subject. So we're narrowing it down. There's a lovely piece by David Bialy about Jewish secular thought. I think this is very relevant today in Israel. But Bialy says, in the non-Jewish Jew, the Polish social revolutionary Isaac Deutscher, who began his education as a yeshiva student, argued that those who rejected their ancestral religion and their people in favor of secular universalism had historical precursors. So the people that I'm looking at, we might think it's a 20th century phenomenon, that there are Jews who are not Orthodox or not associated with any particular stream of Judaism, who are secular, but it's not a new thing. So he writes, in a paradoxical formulation that captures something of his own identity, Deutscher wrote, the Jewish heretic who transcends Jewry belongs to a Jewish tradition. Now, I think heretic's the wrong word there. I'm not using that in my course because I'm talking about people who are just not frum. I think heresy is a pretty high bar. Right, to be a heretic, you have to do some good stuff. I like it when people call me an apikorus. It doesn't happen too often, Rabbi Kelman, but an apikorus is somebody who knows an awful lot of Torah, right? To reach an apikorus level, you're not just somebody who doesn't necessarily believe. This Jewry is Judaism, not only the religion, but all of the traditions built up over nearly 3 millennia. Yet in transcending Judaism, the heretic finds himself or herself in a different Jewish tradition, a tradition no less Jewish for being anti-traditional. Secular universalism for these heretics paradoxically became a kind of Jewish identity. And I'm not, as I say, I don't want to go so far as to say these thinkers are heretics. I think that's harsh. Although I am mindful that if I'm talking about a group of thinkers, and I'm saying they're Jewish, but they weren't in the fold, but they were writing about Judaism, what do we do with them? Even if we called them heretics, which I'm not. So I'm very mindful. Jay, you going? Great to see you. So I'm very mindful of teachings of people like Rav Kook, and Rav Kook in particular, but he's not alone. And Rav Kook says that within the depths of heresy, we find a spark of, godliness. That's where he actually says in his commentary on the Siddur, on the prayer book, he says that's where we'll find the greatest faith. It's a remarkable statement. It's an absolutely remarkable statement. I was once talking to a rabbi who was on Shlichut in the UK, and I told him about this Rav Kook. He said, I don't believe it. Send me the piece. So I had a translation of this section and I sent it to him. He said, I don't understand the English. Send me the Hebrew. So I sent him the Hebrew. And he read the Hebrew. He said, I don't understand it. So I said, I don't understand it. Either as, mystical Rav Kook, but the sentiment is so powerful. Rav Kook saw a spark of the divine in everything, even heresy. So I don't want to say these thinkers are heretical. I don't want people to complain to Torah in Motion that I was calling these people heretics. I'm not.
Could you repeat that statement?
The Rav Kook one. Okay,
Yes.
so Rav Kook said, I'll try and find the quote for you and I'll share it with Rabbi Kelman. He can send it to you. I won't be able to find it in the share now. He says, within heresy is a spark of the divine, right? And if he goes even further and he says, you find this like the most elevated belief. And it's a radical statement. It's an unusual statement for an Orthodox rabbi to say something like that. And it's based partly, I think, in his belief that everything has a spark of divinity. That's very important. But I think it's more than that. It was interesting. I challenged this rabbi. I asked him if he'd ever had doubt. We started the conversation talking about doubt and faith and belief. And he said, no, he'd never had doubt about God's existence. That's incredible. I think everyone has their moments of doubt, tragedy or difficult moments in one's life. And I said to him, so if you've never had doubt, you don't really know what you believe in, right? You've never tested it. You don't know. And I think that's what Rav Kook's getting at, right? When you reach the bottom, it also makes me a bit mindful of Rav Soloveitchik's Lonely Man of Faith. So when you reach that bottom part, the emptiness, the loneliness, the heresy, whatever it will be, that when you come out of that, that's an incredible ascension. And that's why I think looking at non-traditional, non-orthodox thinkers is so powerful, right? They're not bound by, the right-wing orthodoxy. They're not worried to publish things that, their rabbi will be upset with them. They're not worrying about making a shidduch for their children. They're coming from a place of they're concerned about Judaism, Israel, Zionism, and therefore I think they have something very, very powerful and important to say. Okay, I'm going to pause and I'm going to see if has anyone got any questions? I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to be brave so I can see you. I always, you stop sharing and then you can never share again. Okay. I can't see anyone who's got a hand up or any. Okay. So, Herb, yeah, lots of rabbis say lots of. What's the context of what you're saying, Herb, there? Did you call them heretics? Yeah, okay. Yeah, listen, we're in a beautiful community of all sorts of Jewish people that like to throw things and say things. Great rabbis have said outrageous things over the years. And, do you throw the baby out with the bathwater? I don't know, right? I like to take all the good. Okay. Doesn't look like anyone's got any burning questions. I will go back to my PowerPoint. Okay. Oh, excellent. I think you can all see that. Okay. So the next two slides I had real fun putting together. I was talking to Rabbi Kelman about it. First slide is who I didn't include in this course. I have a list of other people. If you all tell Rabbi Kelman it was the best course since sliced bread, that would be great. Then we can run another course after. But wait till we get to the real essence of the course. Heschel. Is Heschel a non-traditional thinker? I wish I could put a poll up now, get you all to think about. So, from an Orthodox perspective, Heschel, gets out of mainstream Orthodoxy because of his association with institutions, which happened a lot in America. I'm sure you all know far more than I do. But I was saying to Rabbi Kelman, we discussed this before tonight, that I certainly think that Heschel was Orthodox his whole life. I heard his daughter speak about it, and there's nothing in his writing, as far as I'm concerned, that should put him outside of Orthodoxy. A great Jewish thinker, but a traditional Jewish thinker. So I excluded Heschel. The second one is, I don't know if you're as aware, is Eliezer Berkovitz. And Berkovitz, again, Orthodox in terms of his life, but his ideas started to be questioned by the more traditional right-wing communities. I mean, some of the greatest writing, my best friend and Chavrusa, who lives in Cleveland, Ohio, just sent me an article about Berkovitz. We talk about Berkovitz a lot, but he's Orthodox. Just because a small section or even a big section of Orthodoxy thinks somebody is outside of the Daled Amot, right? The space of Orthodoxy doesn't mean they're not Orthodox. I'll mention along the way, I'm sure several times on this course, but at the end of today's shir, I will mention Rabbi Sachs. In 2002, Rabbi Sachs wrote a book. It's a book, one of two books that changed my Jewish life. You may have heard of the book, The Dignity of Difference. The Dignity of Difference was Rabbi Sachs's book in response to the tragic events of 9/11. And the first edition, I always joke, was removed from bookstores before the ink was dry, because he was called a heretic. Rabbi Sachs was called a heretic, but I don't think we would say Rabbi Sachs should be a non-traditional thinker. I didn't mean to be so Brit-centric, but I am from Britain, and Louis Jacobs is an incredible Orthodox Jewish thinker, touted to be the chief rabbi, came under fire for his ideas, which was a tragedy. And then, he went off and started a community that was what we call, it was the beginning of the Masorti community, in the UK, which is very similar to the conservative movement in the US. So please feel free in the chat. Who can you name any? I mean modern Jewish thinkers who were Orthodox, but maybe had ideas which were outside the mainstream. Okay, Herb saying traditional Orthodox Shomer Torah mitzvot. You're right. They're all labels. They're terrible labels. Orthodox is a terrible. Oh, that's a really nice one. Meira, is that? I hope I said your name right. Is it you? I could. Oh, good, excellent, great.
What? Sorry.
Yes.
What about Yitz Greenberg?
Oh, okay. So now we're getting real. Oh, this I love it. This means you're all listening, firstly, so that's great, and you're awake, which is a bonus. Okay, I love this. First, I'm going to go with Meira's Rabbi Natan Cordoza. Yes, really great. I mean, I used to go and listen to Rabbi Cordoza when I was in Jerusalem because he's a philosopher, a great thinker. He was involved with Or Sameach, and then he went off and did other stuff. So I'll say it like this. His book, I think it's called Halacha's Rebellion. It's like 99% Orthodox traditional Shomer Torah mitzvahs, right? I'm not going to say all three all the time, right? I'm just going to use the word Orthodox is a terrible label, but it's okay. And it's 99% kosher, this book, and it's like 1%. There are a few points in there where it's a shame, I think, that he took himself outside of orthodoxy in terms of thinking, and that's a shame. And to do it in print is a big problem. That's a great one. I've got Claire here, Mordechai Kaplan. Okay, so I'm not sure Mordechai Kaplan was Shomer Mitzvot. I don't know. I know enough about his thought, but him as a person. So he's like, in the end, he's like a non-traditional thinker talking about Judaism. But I on purpose didn't choose people that had gone off and created another movement or another ideology.
He was definitely not orthodox. He was definitely
Right.
radical reform. But I would say that Shaul Lieberman might be a candidate.
Okay. Well, Shaul Lieberman, yeah, but was he? I mean, maybe you know better than I do. My sense of Shaul Lieberman is that again, his ideas are not radical. He's just out of our traditional world because of his association with institutions, right? It's just
No, the very fact that he was part of the JTS made him treif, but nothing objectively about him could made him that.
That's right. I remember, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember listening to a shir by Mark Shapiro many years ago. Mark is a dear friend, and I still listen to the old shiurim. So if you don't listen to Mark, you should, but I'm sure you all do. Where he said that the conversions of JTS from the 1950s were accepted by the RCA, right? Which is quite incredible. But the Bet Din of JTS in the 50s was acknowledged to be Orthodox people. So Saul Lieberman's interesting. David Hartman, people really like David Hartman because he came up 3 times in the chat. So again, David Hartman, yeah, it could be, but it could be that ideologically it comes under my sort of Mordechai Kaplan rubric, right? But Hartman's book on Rav Soloveitchik, on terror, love, and hate, or whatever it's called, in the thoughts of Rav Soloveitchik, is one of my favorite books. It's an incredible, articulate and detailed view of Rav Soloveitchik. Oh, Herb. Okay. So Rabbi Avi Weiss. Okay, so I have a real connection with Rabbi Avi Weiss. And that was my brother was at YTC back in the day. And Avi is an incredible person. Yeah, he's a really interesting one. I think I would exclude him from this because he's Orthodox. again, I think, and again, I think most of you, I don't know where you all are. So I think most of you are probably North America. If I've offended anyone in Israel, Canada, Australia, South Africa, anywhere else, I'm sorry. The I think Avi, yeah, I think the association with open orthodoxy in recent years has made it interesting, but has he said anything? Ideologically, he's changed. I think somebody said on camera, Yitz Greenberg. Yitz is another great one. I don't know if any of you have read The Triumph of Life, his new, his magnum opus, his great work. And again, the book is a beautiful book. It's all about this vision of the Torah leading the way and Tikkun Olam, making the world better, being good people. It's a lovely message, but a couple of times Yitz just goes a bit too far and takes himself outside the Orthodox camp, because Yitz says, for example,
He
which I
follows
think
the
is fine.
Meiri.
Sorry?
He follows the Meiri regarding a Christian Messiah.
Yeah. I'm not worried about that. I agree with the Meiri and Yitz on that. So that's another topic. But I tell you where he oversteps, in my opinion, is he says women should be rabbis. I agree, right? There's no question. Women should be dayanim. I think that's possible. But he says within Orthodoxy, women should be eidim. Right, they should be witnesses. Now, I don't disagree, sociologically, humanistically, of course women should be witnesses, but from a Torah perspective, it's very hard to see how women could ever be witnesses. It's just something the Torah, it doesn't seem to be, there's room for that. So Yitz also, I feel, these are all fascinating candidates, right? And these are all like a gray line somewhere in the middle. I've picked all these thinkers who are like not orthodox, and these thinkers on the screen at the moment I consider orthodox, and then we've got this whole mishmash in the middle. Rabbi Cordoza, Rabbi Hartman, Avi Weiss, it's Greenberg. This is a fascinating
I've
group.
got another one for you.
Yeah.
And that's Abner Weiss, who's a great, great rabbi, whom the Brits
What's his name?
Abner Weiss.
Oh, okay. I've not heard of him. Okay, I'll take your word.
He was Rabbi Marble Arch Synagogue,
Oh,
and he discontinued his kahuna. And it was,
Gershon, that's a very English accent you've got there, Gershon.
I am from England.
Ah,
Oldest
and I can't help. I've only got a few people on my screen because I'm sharing my screen. There's a Jacobson in the room, and my mother's maiden name was Jacobson. So we'll have to find out if we're related.
I used to know a David Jacobson.
Not related, but I'll get in trouble for talking about family. Okay, these are the ones I excluded. But then I went a little bit further. I thought to myself, who would I include in this course if I was going a bit further back, right? I was thinking about pre-20th century. It's a bit unfair because Herzl just about made it into the 20th century. So now I'm thinking about non-traditional Jews who wrote about Judaism. And I'm sure, oh, by the way, I just saw Asher, thank you, Herman Wouk. I don't know enough about Herman Wouk, so I couldn't comment, but thank you for that. So
that's a good one. What about Spinoza? Have you any opinions about Spinoza? Was he better guy than, or did he deserve to be put in cherem?
So Spinoza, he's Jewish, but not Orthodox by the end, and definitely writing about Judaism. He's writing about all sorts of ideas about God, about resurrection of the dead, right? His philosophy is a Jewish philosophy. If I was going to do early Enlightenment period, then I would definitely have included Spinoza in this course. Herzl's fascinating, right? Herzl's not Orthodox, but he's like his Zionism, his vision, his dream. You'll see some of the people that we're going to study in this course are really important, and Herzl would have fit very nicely. Mendelssohn, I put there, as far as I know, and I think Mark Shapiro's talked about this often. Mendelssohn was Orthodox his whole life or traditional. But considered to be outside, maybe he'd be in our sort of gray area. We'll see. So I'm just picking up. Okay.
How about email Hackenheim?
I didn't hear who you said.
Email Hackenheim.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, Marty, it's all up to you because Emil Fackenheim is in my second series. So if you vote for series 2, then we'll get to Emil Fackenheim, right? That's very good. I didn't mention him on purpose. And the other one I didn't mention was Rosenzweig. So, we're going to have some interesting people in season 2. We'll see. Now, people have put to, I don't really know what to say. Mali Schwartz has said Shlomo Karlbach. I don't even know what to say with that. I'm not going to go there. I think that's a difficult one. Ethan Tucker. Oh yes, that's really interesting. Ethan Tucker's a great guy, interesting thinker. I don't know where he fits. I don't know who Dennis Prager is. That's my ignorance.
That's unbelievable that you don't know who Dennis Prager is. That makes you a Belstop Apicorus.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, it's good to know that they're Aprikosim. Reform Chazanim. Okay. That's lovely. Yes, we get tunes. Okay, we get tunes from all sorts of non-Jewish spaces. We don't need to go to Reform Chazanim to figure out. So this is a fascinating discussion about Jewish thinkers and where we would put people. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. So what I thought I'd do, I thought I would do this first. What I'm going to do is for each thinker, I'm going to give a brief biography. I put where possible there, because it's very important to know when they lived, where they lived, and I will provide what I'm going to do is give you key works, but I'm going to split it into works. If you're interested in the people, then I'll give you the key books that I think you should read if you want to follow up. And then for each thinker, I'm going to look at the central views which are relevant to either Judaism, Zionism, whatever it will be from a Jewish perspective. So each week, that's the format I'm going to follow. So we can have a little test here, but two of these people, I'm sure you recognize. There's no problem with recognizing. Well, you know the list of who we're going to cover. So in the middle here, the only woman in the group is Cynthia Ozick. Many of you will probably recognize bottom left here is Martin Buber. Top left is Isaiah Berlin, so it's quite iconic with his pipe sitting there. Top right is Eric Fromm, and bottom right is George Steiner. So these are the thinkers that we're going to cover in this course. I think it's always nice to see them.
Should Viktor Frankl be one of the part of that group?
Oh, that's very nice. Very, very nice. Yeah, that would be very interesting. I'm going to make a note here. Viktor Frankl. That's very good.
Thank you.
Yes, like that. Okay. He said Viktor Frankl is if you're asking what do you mean? What did who say? It's all very confusing. Okay. I'm going to now just give you the outline for this course. So I've just mentioned all the people that I'm going to cover. And I thought it would be nice to, give you a small taster of each of these people to give it a little bit of context today. I was thinking to myself, would I tell you who my favorite thinker is out of these 5? And I might do that after I've given you a little bit of an overview. I imagine that everyone in the room will have heard and may even know something about Martin Buber. But he is certainly the most recognizable. After Buber, I would imagine many people have heard at least the name Isaiah Berlin and possibly Cynthia Ozick. And I think you'd have to go a bit further afield for people to have, maybe they've heard of, but to have read any of the works of Steiner or Fromm. They're all incredibly prolific in their writing, all wrote something that was really, really central to their Jewish ideas. So Berlin, firstly, lived between 1909 and 1997. So it was a good age. I was trying to work it out. 88 years old. He was Russian, British.
Riga,
So,
Riga, actually. I don't think we should call Riga Russia. Riga.
okay, we're going to talk about exactly where he lived. You're right, but in loose terms, we'll call him British because that's much better from my point of view. He was a social and political theorist, a philosopher, and a historian of ideas. And I think what sets these thinkers out, or sets them apart from many other thinkers, is the sheer breadth of their knowledge, output. I mean, I think Viktor Frankl's a really nice idea, but I wonder whether outside of logotherapy, right, and his obvious Holocaust experience, whether he had a big impact on psychoanalysis, but whether we would put him in the same bracket. So I think about that. I think it's a lovely idea. Okay. So there's an entry in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy about Isaiah Berlin. And it says as follows about him. It says that he was a naturalized British philosopher, historian of ideas, political theorist, educator, public intellectual and moralist and essayist. And that was all before he'd had his first cup of coffee in the morning, right? Incredible mind. He was renowned for his conversational brilliance, his defense of liberalism and pluralism, his opposition to political extremism and intellectual fanaticism, and his accessible, coruscating writings on people and ideas. Before we finish today, I've got a slide, just a little bit more about Isaiah Berlin to lead into next week. And with the best put down any thinker has ever used about another academic.
In America, by the way, we call him Isaiah, not
Yeah, Isaiah Berlin. Yes, yeah. I was going to call him Yeshayahu all the way through, but I thought it was inappropriate. Okay, so that's Berlin. The next thinker that we'll talk about is George Steiner. And George Steiner, I have to actually thank my brother. Many years ago, my brother gave me one of Steiner's books. Steiner lived between 1929 and 2020, only passed away 5 years ago. He was a Franco-American literary critic, essayist, philosopher, novelist, and educator. You don't get into this list unless you've got 5 different professions, right? These are incredible people. He wrote extensively about the relationship between language, literature, and society, as well as the impact of the Holocaust. So some of our thinkers, I talked about, they're writing about Judaism, some of them are writing about Zionism and Israel, and some of them are dealing with post-Holocaust theology. Some of them deal with more than one, but Steiner's very interested in that. In 2001, a newspaper article described Steiner as a polyglot and a polymath, right? The polymath is somebody who is an expert in multiple fields. A polyglot, I don't know which languages he spoke, but it's usually at least 3. But he was an expert in linguistics. I imagine it was many more. So Steiner's really, really interested. I wasn't sure I was going to say this, but the next one, 29th of May, Eric Fromm is by far and away my favorite. Okay. um, one of his books, To Have or to Be. My best friend, I learn on a Monday evening online because my best friend, who used to live in the UK, now lives in Cleveland, Ohio, and we're usually reading all the same books, or we send each other books. And many years ago, he sent me Eric Fromm's To Have or to Be, and it was a real game changer for me. It's a wonderful book. It's a small book, and I love some of the ideas in it, and I'll share those with you. So Eric Seligman Fromm, and he lived between 1900 and 1980. We could see that most of these all really overlapping in terms of their lives. So Fromm was a German-American social psychologist, psychoanalyst, sociologist, humanistic philosopher, and democratic socialist. I don't know. We have these cards, top trumps. I'm sure you have them or played them as kids. You have a character, and they have scores out of 100 for different character traits, and then you win them from your opponent if your score's higher on wisdom than theirs. And I feel like Eric Fromm is somewhere near the top of my list of 5 thinkers, but that may be my personal view. Fromm was a German Jew who fled the Nazi regime, settled in the United States. He was one of the founders of the William Alanson White Institute of Psychiatry, Psychoanalysis, and Psychology in New York City, and was associated with the Frankfurt School of Jewish Theory. Oh, sidetrack, very nice. Justin Leo Strauss. I'm going to write that down as well. Interesting. Strauss might be a little early, but yeah, it's nice. Okay. So from for me, is a really powerful thinker with great ideas, and also an incredible polymath. I think of him in terms of sociology, psychology, philosophy, history. So in the 4th week, we'll look at Martin Buber, and Buber's probably the best known. Famous for his I thou idea, which we'll certainly be talking about. Can I ask people to mute themselves, please?
Can you mute everyone so that we can listen
Yeah.
to you? Because not all of us can stay on for such a long time. Let's save the questions for later.
Yeah. I'm just going to mute everyone, hopefully. If it was obvious for me to do that, I would do it, but I can't see. Oh, hold on. Okay, now I can't see how to do it, but it's got quieter, which is great. Okay. So Buber. And you'll have heard the name. You've probably even heard of the I-thou relationship. Buber lived between 1878 to 1965, so a little bit earlier than our other thinkers. Austrian Israeli philosopher, best known for his philosophy of dialogue, a form of existentialism centered on the distinction between I-thou and the I-it relationship. We'll do that briefly because it's very complex, but we will do it. He was born in Vienna. Buber came from a family of observant Jews, but broke with Jewish custom to pursue secular studies in philosophy. Philosophy is dangerous. He produced writings about Zionism and worked with various bodies within the Zionist movement extensively over a period of 50 years, right? So an important Jewish non-traditional thinker writing about Judaism. And the last thinker that we'll deal with in June 12th, is Cynthia Ozick, born in 1928. An American short story writer, novelist, and essayist. But I think Ozick's most interesting because of commentary on American Jewish life, but she also writes about politics, history, and literary criticism. But she's written about, which will be most interesting for us, the Holocaust and feminism from a Torah perspective. So, really important thinker. I'm very open to suggestions of other women who might fit into this category because it's not an easy group. Yeah, okay. So Herb was asked if you can deny God and still be Jewish. Yeah, I think that's no problem. He might deny God, but he's still thinking about it. Just go back to Rav Kook. Okay. So in the last few minutes, and then I'll allow some time for questions. I'm just sort of thinking forward about next week.
What about Nechama and her brother Yeshayahu?
Sorry, say that again.
What about Nechama and her
Please leave the questions till the end.
Okay. People are asking for questions at the end. Put it in the chat. I'll come to it. And those people who have to go will have to go. So Isaiah Berlin, we'll cover in detail next week. I found this quote where he said, "On the surface he's profound, but deep down he's superficial." It's just a great put down. I'm sure he just thought about it on the spot. But what I'm going to do next week at the beginning, I'll do my biography and key works. I mean, he's written so many books, but I'll pick out one or two that I think are most important. The first third after that, I will deal with Rabbi Sachs's Isaiah Berlin Memorial Lecture from 2003. It's a great lecture. I'll give the link next week so that you can read the whole lecture because I'm just going to pick out 3 parts of it. But according to Rabbi Sachs, Berlin had 3 dominant themes in his work. And these really are key ideas within Isaiah Berlin's thinking. And they are a defense of freedom, the power of ideas, has a book called The Power of Ideas, and the ideas have a history. Now, I'm not going to unpack these today, but what's really fascinating in Rabbi Sachs's lecture, what he does is he says that even though Berlin may not consciously be linking these 3 ideas to his Jewishness, these are very Jewish ideas. Now, that doesn't quite fit with my approach in this series, because, that's like the question I had before about Ludwig Wittgenstein. Just because he's Jewish, when he's writing philosophy of language, I'm not going to talk about him. But what's interesting is Rabbi Sachs's reading of these 3 big ideas in Berlin's thought and how they really are Jewish ideas. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that because I think it's a really nice way of looking at thinkers. But much more important are Berlin's views on Jews, as in the people, Judaism, the religion, and Israel, the place. And he has a lot to say. So I have some fascinating sources from all over his writings, and we'll see what he has to say about those topics. So that's where I am. I'll let people think if they've got any questions, but I've just seen in the chat people keep coming up with new ideas for thinkers. Yeshayahu Leibovitz, yeah, really interesting idea. But I think Nechama, I wouldn't put into this category. But Yeshayahu Leibovitz is interesting, obviously, in terms he writes a lot about Judaism. I mean, writes on the Parsha, he writes all of these things from a non-traditional perspective. Like if things go really well, I think I'm moving into season 3. Like we may finish all these thinkers by around 2037. I hope that's okay. I don't mean the time, I mean the year. Leon Cass, possibly, yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, critique, ideas? Very happy to take questions. Got a couple of minutes.
could I suggest two more women and ask a question? The two women I was going to suggest was Ruth Weiss and Dana Holland.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. So there are definitely, in the last decade, I would say we have a rich tradition of really excellent writers, and people are thinking deeply about tradition where they've left the tradition. And I'm a little bit cautious of not tackling polemicists, right? It may be that I don't think any of the five people, maybe Cynthia Erzik a little bit closest to polemics because she's got a very strong agenda. But I didn't put her in by mistake because she's a voice that we should be considering. But yeah, they're interesting ideas.
could I ask a question? There was a book that came out uh, about 12 years ago. It was called The Jewish Divide Over Israel. And 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 I know about the book because I was asked to write one of the chapters. And the book was about Jews who were very severe critics of Israel. And if I remember, it was not the essay that I wrote, but one of the essays about them was that somebody else wrote was about George Steiner.
Right. Oh, excellent. You'll have to send me a copy.
Well, uh, uh, it's available
Okay.
on Kindle. And my essay was about Tom Friedman. But
Okay.
you need to consider. But the whole issue of people becoming critical of Israel has, I think, opened a whole new dimension in your studies. And I wonder how you were going to handle that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no end to it. There is absolutely no end to it. Okay. In the chat, somebody's put Franz Rosenzweig. He's in my list for season 2. Fackenheim is in my list for season 2. Obviously, it's quite interesting because Fackenheim and Buber, if you listen to JJ Kimchi's Torah in Motion podcast, he had a series on Fackenheim and Rosenzweig and Buber, who together collaborated on the translation of the Chumash, which is really interesting. But I recommend the podcast. So, okay, everyone, it's 1 minute 2. So you've got you don't be shy. Okay, if there are no more questions or comments, I'm looking forward to seeing you all again next week. Please God, we'll do a deep dive into Berlin, and I will make sure, I know you get the handouts, but I will put in the chat next week the link to the Rabbi Sachs lecture and any other outside sources so you can access them all easily electronically.
Thank you.
As it's Thursday evening, I feel comfortable wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Thank you.